ನೋಡ್ರ ಹೋಗು.
PhD on your books.
I'm not the PhD.
Last time when you came, you need our department.
A small outlet, like in Hyderabad. Not small, you have a large. This I did it in the lines of our. Some of this Rameshwar House work. Thank you. Kanta's work. Oh, I have it. You know, I know her. You saw this one? Penguins I have. It's a very beautiful book. Goes through. No, I'd like to see anything of my. Bringing off and on. Yeah, now it comes back. Yeah.
These are the mechanical, not technical. Yes, technical, civil and management.
It's only the history going in. As a industrial So they are not publishing it, they are looking for somebody to publish it. Aisha. Muslim name. Wow.
Eminent editors, readers, writers, so many people of Hyderabad assembled there. Seeing the response, I promised to them we will have regular meetings of that kind in Hyderabad. And the success of these meetings is attributed to the little theatre. Some of the members are sitting here, and Mr. Melkote, who is the coordinator of this little theatre, made the events much more attractive, much more lively, since some of the authors may not be able to read. They may be very good writers, they may not be able to read effectively or properly. But the little theatre is a real asset to us. They helped us in making these events successful. Having done this in Hyderabad for the last 18 months, we are fortunate to have eminent authors. Started, as I mentioned, Miss Manjula Padmanabhan, Orosi Patalia, Jayanta Mahapatro, R.K. Lakshman, M.C. Gabriel, Geeta Hariharan, Narendra Luther, and others. Requested him to visit Vizag. He said, at 86 Ashok, I can't travel so long again. So then I said, sir, at least for my sake, kindly make it convenient this time. You can stay for 1 or 2 days more, take rest, and then you can go to Delhi from here directly. Which he kindly accepted, and I am grateful to him for this, making this event a success. And I am sure that you will find this program an interesting one, and depending on the response I get from your feedback, so maybe we will do much more programs in Vizag. And with this small introduction, I now request the little theatre to start the reading of the works of Mr. Kushwanth Singh, after which Mr. Kushwanth Singh will answer your questions and you can interact with him. He will address you. Thank you.
It is indeed a privilege to introduce to you a man who took the train to Pakistan on a journey into the partition horrors of post-independence India. A man who proudly said, I shall not hear the nightingale. A man with many moods and many faces who highlighted to the world the mark of Vishnu. A man who bearded the Sikhs in their own temples, first by writing his inimitable history of the Sikhs, and then by compiling a series of joke books which transformed the Sardar's art of laughing at himself into a fine science. A man who has been a journalist, an editor, a lawyer, a writer beyond compare, a translator beyond belief. A connoisseur of whiskey and wine. A legend who mastered the grace of giving back as good as he got. If it was not in the barbed arena of repartee, it was in the portals of Parliament. He is also the only ex-MP who gave back his Padma Bhushan award in protest against the siege of the Golden Temple. He is one man who outlived Bindranwala's death threat. An Urdu-spouting, plain-speaking Surd who has used the sharpness of his pen to soften the agony of life. A man who is often found with a light bulb, within a light bulb, where he proceeds to tear apart all and sundry with malice towards one and all. A man who is perhaps more often found in the company of women. Ladies and gentlemen, one man who we all love to hate. One man who we should all be proud to have in our midst. Kushwanth Singh.
Your lovely city of Visakhapatanam. I am equally delighted to be associated with this reading of Sardar Kushwanth Singh Sahib's works. This evening we will be reading, of course, Sarojini.
From almost the time their relationship began, both Mohan and Sarojini had known that it could not last very long. The world outside, which they pretended did not exist, would eventually catch up with them, but not in the nasty way it did. Came the 1st of November. While Sarojini was having her bath, Mohan put an envelope with rupees 10,000 on her pillow. When she joined him for breakfast, she said just one word, thanks. He said nothing. The crisis came the next morning. Mohan was scanning the pages of the Hindustan Times. He had no interest in politics, and the paper had little besides politics to fill its pages. The page he usually scanned casually to see if he could recognize the names or faces of the people in it was the one which carried obituaries. That morning there were lots of boxed items with photographs of the people who died the day before and several in memoriam messages for people who had died that day some years earlier. He went down the columns and stopped midway. Right in the center was a picture of his father-in-law. The accompanying text read, "We deeply regret to announce that our revered father, Rai Bahadur Lala Achint Ramji, suddenly left for his heavenly abode on the evening of 31st October. Cremation will take place at the Lodi Road Crematorium at 11 a.m. on 1st November. Chauta will take place at Mata Ka Mandir, Friends Colony East on Sunday, 7th November at 4 p.m. Under the line grief-stricken were the names of the family members, beginning with Shobha Achintram, wife, then the 3 sons and their wives. His wife was listed singly as Sonu, daughter. At the end were the names of his children, Ranjit and Mohini. The only name missing in the list was his own, Mohan Kumar. Evidently, he was no longer regarded a part of his wife's family. The last item in the obituary was a list of the sugar mills and companies that the deceased had owned. Mohan told Sarojini about it and said, "I'm in 2 minds about going to the funeral. They obviously don't regard me as a relation anymore, but some members of my office staff are bound to go there to condole. What shall I do?" "It's a very dicey situation," she replied. "But you don't have to line up with your mother-in-law, wife and brothers-in-law to thank the people present." Mohan thought over the matter for some time and decided to act. "Yes, sir, I will," she said.
"I don't know," replied Mohan. "I only read of his death in the paper this morning." There was quite a crowd at the cremation ground. The car park was full. Mohan asked Jeevan Ram to drop him outside the gate and park the car by the road, as he would be leaving before the others. Some people came to condole with him, mostly his staff and friends. Mohan saw the hearse come in, followed by a line of cars carrying members of the family. As the corpse was taken out of the van by his wife's brother, there were emotional scenes, people embracing each other, women clasping the widow, and Sonu and sobbing.
And magazines in the India International Centre Library. He took a walk around the Lodi garden. The trees and the neat-looking tombs depressed him today. By the time he got home, it was dark. Sarojini was waiting for him, not in her nightie, but properly clad in salwar kameez. He did not go to his room to take a shower and get into his sports outfit. He sat down beside her. "Tell me what happened," she asked, taking his hand. "You look depressed." "I have reason to be," he replied. "Give me time to collect my thoughts. Fix me a drink." Sarojini had never poured out a drink for anyone, but knew roughly how much Mohan took. "Know your name, because the servants don't know, or in what college you teach. But she will ferret it out once she finds out."
"I'm not sure," Sarojini said. "I'll take the first train on which I can get a seat and let you know. How's my Munna?" She listened for a while, then said, "Good night," and put the phone down. "All is well with everyone. Tomorrow I'll try to book my seat on the Dehradun Shatabdi Express. I believe it leaves New Delhi railway station very early in the morning, 6 or thereabouts." "Not to worry," he replied. "I'll have the office get your ticket and the reservation." No matter what time it leaves, I'll drive you to the railway station.
Board announcing my office and my residence. I had it all going for me, except I didn't have clients. So it was a very disparate year, 7 years without any work or very little work to do. And I started scribbling stories and anecdotes, of which one you heard about the election was written at that time. Then the partition came to my rescue. I lost everything in Lahore, including the little legal practice I had. And I was very relieved because I realized that it sunk into me. It was such a waste of life to make a living out of other people's quarrels. And that's what the lawyers do. So I was relieved. I came out. I could have stayed in the profession on the Indian side, but I swore never to have anything to do with the law again. Lucky to get into the diplomatic service. I served in London and in Canada, and soon realized there's not much in it. I didn't have very much work to do. It was largely entertaining, riding cars with CD written on them, being addressed as Your Excellency. And I realized that my successor would have the same privileges as I was enjoying, and I'll be wasting my life. By then, some stories that I had written in my Lahore days were accepted by American, Canadian, and British magazines. And the idea came to me that I should turn to writing as a profession. The background was not very promising. I was a very poor student, barely passed my examinations. But seeing that my stories had been accepted and published, I realized that being a good student has very little to do with the art of communication. Some of the boys with me topped the exams in the ICS. They became governors, they became ambassadors, they became secretaries of the government. And I, who barely passed my exams, started writing books. So the usual taunt I heard is, he never read any books, but he started writing them. But that went on for some time. And then this obsession with what I had seen of the partition on both sides, the most diabolical occurrence, I think, in the history of the world, when 10 million people were forced to leave their homes and migrate to the other side, and nearly 1 million were slain by cruel mobs, either Muslims on one side, Hindus and Sikhs on the other. And I felt I had to get rid of this traumatic experience, and so came the novel Train to Pakistan. And then I decided to take the plunge. I kept saying to myself, nothing venture, nothing have. So I did venture. I threw up the diplomatic service, much to the dismay of my father, who felt, this fellow is a little wonky, this boy. I thought he'd do well in life. But, he's read a few books and he's written one, and he's lost his sense of balance. He was a very generous man. I would not have dared to continue this profession except for his generosity. He sustained me through the years when I made no money. I had no income. I persisted in it. At times I was taunted by his friends who said, "Kuch kaam karta hai ki baap ki kamai pe rehta hai." And I had to live through that for many years. And slowly it came, my books started being published, my articles started being published, and I was offered jobs as an editor, which I edited several papers. And at long last, late in life, a certain amount of success came to me. I don't like to talk about myself too much because I think it's very vulgar to talk about oneself. I've been lucky. I've made a certain amount of notoriety. I've published a few novels. My main work was the history of my own community, which I think is the only one which may last after I'm gone. I don't know if my novels or short stories will be there. That's up to you to decide, because my time's coming pretty close. I'm 86. I'd just like to mention two topics which rankle in my mind, which concern the writing profession. One is the patronage given by the government. I think initially it was important that the writers should be given some amount of encouragement to find publishers, to find translators. But over the years we found that this has proved counterproductive. It only helps the second rate to survive. And in literature, it's most important. It should be the survival of the fittest. If they can't find publishers, they should be allowed to die out. And what the Sahitya Academies and other things have done is to breed the second rate. And I always say it's like putting fertilizer on a patch of weeds. Not one of the people published by the Sahitya Academy has really made it in the commercial market. And I think that it is time that the Sahitya Academy and other academies of literature close down and let the writer struggle for recognition on his own merit. The other point I like to make, and which has caused a lot of offense to many people, I have often said that our own writing in our own language, translations are poor. Because I think our vocabulary in our languages is very poor compared to the English. English is a very rich language. That's why it is triumphed over French in becoming a word language. It is a bastard language. It has borrowed words from any language it came into contact with, including our own. There are said to be over 10,000 words of Indian origin found in the Oxford Dictionary today. But our worst enemies are purists, who keep saying we must keep our languages pure. We don't have the vocabulary. Whenever I say it, they immediately brand me as anti-Indian. There's nothing anti-Indian about it. It's patent to us. Language of diplomacy, language of law, language of technicians, technology. Listen to the debates in Parliament. Half of the speeches are made in English because we don't have enough words in our own languages to express those. Even more disappointing is that the world of nature, we don't have enough words for birds, trees, animals, colors. They're all either Latin or something. You ask any writer, how many birds, trees can you name? It'll be about 10, 12. Me, people, speaker, 4 or 5 finished. You ask him to name the flowers. Then how can he, if he doesn't know, how can he paint the Indian landscape if he doesn't have the vocabulary? I think the answer is to borrow, steal, beg, take words from any language you like and mold it into an Indian framework. And then we'll be able to make our languages rich. I've often questioned my Indian friends, and I said, you always accuse me of being anti-Indian when I say this. I said, tell me, in a language we don't have the difference between snow and ice. We don't have difference between yesterday and tomorrow. They're both dull. You don't have difference between mouse and a rat. It's just chew up. You know, you have to be daring and say no. If we don't have the word, we steal it from the English language. And I think if we do that, we'll be doing a service to our own language. And we will enrich. That's why there'll be no recognition of Indian languages in the world outside. If you have to do it, your first priority is to enrich the vocabulary. Now that's all I'm going to say, and if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Justify the transformation of Jugga at the end of Train to Pakistan.
At the end of Train to Pakistan.
lives, to save the lives of the members of the other community. And I thought that this was worth highlighting. I lived in Pakistan, I was born in Pakistan. I had absolutely no animus towards the Muslims. They were victims of history like we were victims of history. And instead of leaving a legacy of hatred, which the event itself had left, I'm glad to see that writers on both sides, on the Pakistani and the Indian side, expressed deep anguish at what had happened. And this is the way I expressed my anguish. I'd heard these stories of what had happened, the incident of the boy giving up his life to save the lives of his fellow villagers who were all Muslims. That incident did take place. It wasn't particularly this man, I dramatized it. But there were incidents of that kind. And one true one, which has been filmed both in Pakistan and in India, under the title of the film is called Shaheed-e-Mohabbat. I think this Gurbachan Man of singer has made the film. That incident was true. A man called Bhuta Singh, a retired army Havaldar, saved a Muslim woman who had been abducted by a gang of Sikhs and kept her in his home, then fell in love with her. She fell in love with him. They had a child. And then came these rescue squads to rescue abducted woman. And she was forced to get out and return to Pakistan. She did not want to, but she was forced. And this man, Bhuta Singh, followed her a few days later, carrying their child. And when he arrived there, this woman was so frightened by her Muslim relations who threatened to murder her if she dared contradict them. And she in court said that she did not know this man, had never known him, the child was not hers. And so this man left with a broken heart, and the first thing he did was to put his head against him coming on train, and he died, Bhuta Singh. And he was buried near Lahore, and his grave has become a place of pilgrimage. Now there were incidents, moving incidents like that. And I thought it was the duty of the writer who wanted to dissipate the clouds of hatred that had grown between the communities and the two countries, to do his best to give another version, because ultimately hate doesn't triumph, love triumphs. Enough?
You are commenting on the degradation of marriage values, is it?
Well, you know, I think in my introduction I've said what it is all about. I've said that these are fantasies of an octogenarian. When a man gets old, his sex instincts move from the middle to his head. What he can't do, he fantasizes about. And I wasn't really keen to publish this novel, I confess. I had started making these notes as I was getting older. I was getting lustier in my mind. And I think it happens to most people, so why not put it down? And when my publisher said, let me look at this manuscript, and I said, no, I don't want it. He said, no, please let me have a look. Reluctantly, I gave him the manuscript, which I had written in hand, and he put it in shape, and out came this book. I think it's a thoroughly bad novel, but it has been on the top of the bestseller list now for the second month going. So the moral is there. You write a bad book and it succeeds. You write a good book and nothing inside. I've heard my best work is the 2-volume history of the Sikhs. And after 20 years, I think it's only in the 3rd printing. My joke books, there are 5. Some have gone into 30 prints, and I make much more money out of those frivolous joke books than I've done through my serious work. That's a dispiriting side of publication.
Professor Datta, earlier, during your visit earlier here.
You're talking about my novel Delhi?
Yes, sir.
Well, you know, the main character there, Bhagmati, she's nothing to do with Hyderabad. Bhagmati is a Hijra. She's the main character in my novel in Delhi. and I chose a hijra as symbol of a sterile city. You know, a hijra can do everything except produce. It can't have children, otherwise it can have sex like man or woman. And I thought this was a very good symbol for a city which had been ravished by so many conquerors and yet had produced one poet, really one major poet, Ghalib, and perhaps two or three smaller ones, contemporaries. No artists, no great people, so I thought this would be a nice person to symbolize my city. It's really symbolic. There's no truth behind it. It's entirely fantasy.
Do you think that there's a definite movement in Indian literature in English at the time? And do you think that there's a tendency to pander to the Western audience at all?
I don't think so. Yeah, you take it from me as a personal statement on behalf of all the people who've done well. Any author who is conscious of his audience will write absolute rubbish. You have to write as what comes to your mind. I don't think Salman Rushdie pandered to a Western audience. I don't think Vikram Seth pandered to a Western audience. Amitabh Ghosh, Arundhati Roy, none of them did the slightest have any intention of this being meant for a foreign audience. They spoke written as honestly as they could. And for the first time in the history of India, we have writers who've made their mark in the world of literature outside their own country. I'm very proud of them. My generation didn't, but I think this crop of young writers that's come up is handling the English language, I would say, better than any English writer, any Englishman or American today.
You portrayed Iqbal as indecisive, ambiguous, and somewhat cowardly in comparison with Jugdu. Are there any reasons behind this portrayal?
What did I portray as a cowardly thing?
The educated
yeah, well,
man
when I started writing the novel, the main theme in my mind was that every human being has the combination of the trinity of Hindu gods, the creator, the preserver, and the destroyer, in different proportions. And I thought I'd symbolize them in different characters, but then they got mixed up. The creator is the peasant, Jaga, who is the hero, who gives up his life. The magistrate is the preserver, and the communist is the destroyer. So I had these three main characters, but then, you know, when you start writing, the characters start dictating to you. Instead of you dictating, they're telling the characters what to do, they start telling the author what he should write about them. So it got somewhat mixed up. That's why ultimately the hero was the illiterate peasant who didn't even understand the scriptures. So when he went to lay down his life, he went to the Gurdwara to ask the blessings, and when he was told to, some prayer was recited, and he asked what is the meaning, and the Bhai said, what are you concerned with meaning? What does it mean to you? Nothing. And so that was enough for him. He just wanted a kind of formal blessing to do a job in which he was determined to lay down his life. That's why he became powerful and the other two were cowardly. So, shall I say again? They've done a splendid job and made me proud. Even I was moved at hearing my own show. Thank you.
An ad filmmaker. He is also a copywriter and a columnist with a leading English daily in Hyderabad, Vijay Maru. I am Shankar Meilkote. I am a friend of Mr. Ashok Kumar, a friend of Ashok Book Center, and I love reading books. Thank you very much.
Sri.Kushwanth, who came all the way at the age of 86 I also thank Sri Shankar Melkote and the Little Theatre. I apologize to Mr. Marur for not ease to introduce Mr. Kushwanth Singh, which I failed to mention that. I am sorry about it. And as a token of appreciation of their coming all the way from Hyderabad to here and spending a day, they came this morning and again leaving to tomorrow. A small gesture of appreciation. I request a small mementos to the members of the group. And to Mr. Shankar Melkote, he didn't disclose his position. He is the managing director of Margadarshi Marketing and Kadanjali. He also acted in several films, the latest one being Mechanic Mamaya. Earlier, I think there is one Srivarik Piremlekha. The Little Theatre consists of, apart from them, there are several retired Air Force officials, several eminent people, I can say, who helps us in making these events a success. I earnestly thank them also, having come all the way from Hyderabad. Thank you, all of you, who made this event a success. Thank you very much.